In this exhibition entitled Impermanence, artist Traé Brooks from Windsor, Connecticut, uses sculpture, painting, and found materials to preserve the histories of people, places, and memories. Brooks acknowledges the stories behind each piece and their enduring impact, which become a part of his own history. Brooks earned his BFA in painting from the Hartford Art School at the University of Hartford in 2019. He is currently a year-long artist-in-residence at the Steel Yard in Providence, Rhode Island. Brooks recently showed his work through a solo exhibition at Real Artways in Hartford, Connecticut, and in group exhibitions at the Widener Gallery in Trinity College, the Farmington Valley Art Center, and the Albany Center Gallery in New York. This exhibition was curated and organized by Fall 2023 Art 490 curatorship students Kathy Law, Emily Lopez, Waika Galarza Rodriguez, and Justin Torres. These students had the unique opportunity to produce and plan a professional exhibition, including personally inviting the artist to show at the gallery, working directly with Brooks to select the pieces and concepts for the space, and creating a marketing plan and budget. This exhibition was fully funded through a faculty student research grant prepared by Waika Galarza Rodriguez. So please join me in welcoming Traé Brooks.
Hello. First of all, thank you all for coming. I'm super happy to see some familiar faces and some new faces, and to be able to kind of show the work and kind of talk about sort of my process and kind of the work itself and what it all means. I guess to kind of start off the conversation is to kind of talk about, I guess the theme behind the show, or behind some of the works, which kind of, I guess the theme, as per the title of Impermanence, is kind of me kind of, I guess just creating works or creating artwork that kind of almost act as archives or kind of markers in time in relation to people in my life, places, certain memories I've had growing up and kind of the formative years of my life, and how that's had an impact on me kind of, I guess leading up to I guess now. So really, and also the idea of impermanence, just how a lot of these sort of ideas and people and places are just that. They're, in a lot of ways, they're kind of impermanent, or they're not meant to last. Very kind of more or less comes from sort of a Buddhist ideology where kind of life ebbs and flows, and people and places and things exist for a certain period of time and then they just don't. So really the work is kind of me, I guess, grappling with that and trying to find my own understanding of it in a lot of ways, in some ways kind of rejecting it as well, kind of taking certain materials and I guess holding on to those certain things, and then at the same time also having to kind of let them go, where it's just, certain pieces, kind of letting go of or detaching myself from certain feelings or certain things that no longer resonate. And which I think is where kind of a lot of it, when it comes to the actual material itself, some of the found objects I use, definitely plays into that, where that definitely, or that particular object, or even certain fabrics or found materials, has its own story. In a lot of ways, I'm kind of taking that story and kind of adding it to my own, but in a weird way, kind of harkens back to a lot of things in my life, and how they all kind of interconnect, if that makes any sense. So I guess that's where a lot of my process kind of deals with, is just sort of kind of playing with a lot of that idea of just attachment to objects, and also kind of detachment at the same time kind of thing. So I don't know where to go from here. I guess.
Start with this piece, which is on the poster.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So this piece is of it's a portrait of someone I don't know, hence why it's sort of like a blank, or why there's like sort of like no face to it. I think it mainly came from sort of because a lot of like I guess like figures in my work is like reflections of like my family members or people close to me and things in that regard. And often like I'll use like this sort of family photo album that I have as like a reference. And to be frank, like there are certain people in the album, I'm just like, who is that? Like I have no idea who that is. They could be a cousin, they could be an uncle, aunt, relative, whoever. So I kind of chose to reflect that in this piece, where it's like there is a relation there. Like I feel like a connection there, but at the same time, it's like I have no frame of reference or context. So, kind of like exploring that concept. I mean, and I think a lot of people can relate to, just certain relatives or family members that you don't know, but yet you have this sort of, in literal sense, like a bloodline relation to. That's even the case with, if I can just pivot for a second, these two pieces in particular, of the mirror and this wooden piece, where they're portraits of my grandfather, who I've never met. He passed away before I was born, and yet, I'll find like sort of like things in my household that like kind of like, oh yeah, that used to be his, or like, oh, that shirt you're wearing like used to belong to him, and you just decided to randomly wear it for no reason. But I like to kind of believe that, like the essence of a person kind of stays with you, or like kind of sticks around. So I wanted to reflect that in both like, the mirror, and as well as like this wooden piece too, because he also was a carpenter in his life, and he used to work with like sort of construction and like kind of rough material. So, which is even more ironic considering the fact that I work in metal and wood, and often use like industrial material for my work. So it's kind of funny how, again, that kind of that idea of like just sort of these objects, I guess, or either these objects or this process kind of finding me, and not necessarily, and just sort of me having a connection to that regardless. So I'm trying to think, again, like I'm trying to, feel free to jump in, just want it to be as casual as possible. Yeah.
Traé,
Yes.
when you first connected, you reached out, you were making sculpture. And unfortunately, I never got up to the makerspace to see what you're up to, but I really enjoyed what I saw in the photos. Did you do much sculpture when you were at University of Hartford? Is that something that you started to explore after?
So funny enough, I think yes and no. So I studied painting at University of Hartford, and that was pretty much just what I was focused on, was just painting, and just like no sort of initially like no sort of deviation from that. And then after a certain point, I started kind of experimenting with other material, and would actually like kind of kind of create like this additive process where I would just like add certain things to the canvas, kind of like sort of similar to Rauschenberg's like combine paintings, where he would just like kind of combine different elements onto the canvas, and it would be like this sort of hybrid between painting and sculpture. And I think that's just kind of naturally like how the work kind of evolved from there. And you can even see it in like that sort of painting over there, or even this quilt, where it's like I'm kind of combining fabrics onto like a canvas, and then it starts to have like a sculptural, it starts to become a sculptural piece, like the more I kind of sort of play around with material. So yeah, in a weird way, it kind of like, it eventually kind of evolved into just like being fully 3D. But even then, I still kind of jump back and forth between kind of 2D and 3D.
It's a dramatic transition to make for many.
Yeah.
The way you got there sounds very natural, but when you went fully 3D, did it take a while before you felt comfortable in that media and with the processes and fooling around, or is it something that made sense right up?
I think it was something that I kind of had to gradually get used to, because there were there's certain like learning curves that you kind of encounter when you like work fully 3D. So it's like I mean, even still now, like a lot of it's still a learning process, where even as I'm kind of continuously working 3D, it's like, I'm adding stuff, I'm taking stuff away, I'm constantly like editing, because I'm still learning it still very much feels like I'm learning the process, and as well as like studying other sculptors that kind of, I guess, work in a similar fashion. So yeah, so it wasn't, I think part of it is intuitive, but for the most part, it was very learning as I go.
The reason I ask is because that usually is the case for most 2D people that move into 3D. But one thing that I think is really impressive and noticeable about the sculpture that I see here and the many that I saw in photos was that they look like the same visual language, the same design sensibilities that you had going on in your two-dimensional works. And that's something that doesn't tend to happen for quite a while, and it's very impressive to see.
That's funny you say that, because I felt like that wasn't happening. It felt like I was kind of constantly struggling with that, but I think now I'm starting to kind of see it a little bit, just because like I've been continuously working with the process, so it's like naturally I've kind of starting to develop an eye for it. But I mean, thank you regardless. But yeah, it's just initially I didn't really.
But you probably didn't show me those in between.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I was very selective of what I chose.
I have another question. So you mentioned that piece is somebody that you don't know.
Yeah.
But then there are pieces that are very specific family members.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about that conflation of found images and unknown people that get integrated with family pictures and family albums, and what's the impetus to do that? What does that mean for you?
Sure, yeah. I think in a lot of ways it's kind of, it feels very confusing, because it's like, I think just based off of like the source of where I kind of get these images, where it's like, it's meant to be like sort of someone that is either like close familial wise, or just someone that just happens to have like some sort of connection. I think in a lot of ways, it feels natural, only because I have like in a lot of ways I kind of like sort of attached like this sort of familiarity to like that type of image, like even like in this image where like I don't really know the person, there's still like that a sort of weird sort of connection to it. I think mainly, I guess you can make the argument where like for most paintings or most like creations that you make, like you're gonna feel attached to it no matter what. So I think that kind of, those two kind of conflate a little bit, but even then, like sometimes I kind of struggle with that. Even like in certain like depictions of family members where I haven't had a connection with in such a long time, I think that kind of, there's also that element to it too, where it's like even from, someone that's supposed to be familiar feels like a stranger now, and like kind of, I'm still kind of like coming to terms with that and still trying to like navigate my way of like understanding or trying to find some sort of closure with that. But yeah, it's, I don't know, it's like, for some reason it feels natural in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like the crossover between finding the familiar in this found image of this person that has no connection to you, and then the images of your family members that you found, and then also that loss of familiarity.
Yeah. I think, because you and I had a conversation a few weeks prior, and you mentioned something along the lines of it's almost like anti-archive, and that kind of stuck with me, because I feel like that in a weird way that perfectly describes sort of the work, where it very much feels like I'm sort of archiving or kind of like preserving a lot of these materials, but it's like a lot of them are decayed, or like a lot of them are kind of like very rough, and then some of them are just like unfamiliar. So I think there's something about like that sort of process that I find interesting for some reason, where it almost feels like it's sort of me discovering myself in a way. But like I said, as far as like the sort of connection between the familiar and the unfamiliar, I feel like that just kind of is part of like what it means to have an identity, where it's like you have these sort of moments in your life where it's like you think you know who you are, and then it's like, and then there are times where it's like I have no idea who I am or what I'm doing, and just like none of it feels right. So I think it's like me kind of going through that process, and I guess like in a process in a sense where just kind of going back to like that sort of family sort of roots and discovering certain, I guess, surprises or certain like unexpected twists.
One more try. Two female portraits, the large ones in the back there, and then this one over in this corner. They read to be very powerful poses, powerful depictions of these two women. Is that something that relates to who they were for you and in your life?
Yeah, I think most definitely, because just based off of my background, I was raised by my mother and my grandmother, so it's like that sort of the imagery of like powerful women in my life has always been kind of a staple, and it's always been kind of something that, like, I guess whether I'm conscious of it or not, tends to kind of pop up every now and again. So, but yeah, so it's kind of, it's funny because I feel like a lot of the times whenever I'm kind of creating work or creating like sort of portraits, it's either my grandma, which in this room alone, you see plenty of her, and just my mother, because like that just, those, I've always said those are like my pillars. Yeah.
Can you tell us more about the video piece?
Sure, yeah. So the video was something unexpected, I guess is the best way to put it, because I wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to do a video. But then I figured, why not? Might as well. Otherwise, like, what else is that room going to be used for? And also because I think lately I've been kind of doing a lot of like poetry writing, and kind of also dealing with like certain like issues in my life, or sort of things in my life where the video in a lot of ways was kind of me reflecting that almost, and almost kind of a bit of a catharsis, just to kind of like put it out there, kind of talking about like dealing with like loss, or dealing with sort of a distance, whether that's a physical distance between people in my life, or emotional, or things of that nature. So, and I think so I decided, why not just put video together of like, certain places that used to mean a lot to me, depictions of like certain family members, and then also like myself reciting these words. And it also helped to kind of pull everything together, like pull the show together thematically, just because it very much feels like this sort of ethereal or this fleeting moment. So I wanted to do my best to hold on to it as much as I can. So, yeah. So that's kind of more or less where the video came from. Yeah.
As you look around, are there any that, looking at them now in this space and people here, that you want to make sure we hear about? All of them, of course.
Well, yeah, it was just all of them. That's why they're here. But I guess, I I don't know. It's fun. It's interesting you put that because I feel like their depictions is already enough. Because it's also one of those weird things where it's like I'm always aware of, I guess, boundaries or just kind of like how personal is too personal, and like that's always been kind of like the main struggle I've had with like making work that's like centered around that. So I always try to be careful to kind of like, yes, these are depictions, but I also don't want to like say too much just out of respect because some members are still with us, some are not. So it's like I want to be mindful of that, I guess. Not to kind of skirt around the the question. I just think that
You want people to respond to them in their own way.
yeah, and I also think too, it's like I also have to be mindful of the fact that while these are depictions, like at the same time, and this kind of plays into the theme of the show where I have to separate myself. Like I have to kind of let it go and just like allow people to kind of come at the work or view the work however way they want. And I just have to, for the most part, I just have to kind of be okay with that. Yeah. Thank you.
I have another question. I'm sorry. But one of the questions that I got a lot about one piece in particular, that one, with the naturalization certificate.
Yeah.
A lot of people ask me, is that real? Is that the actual naturalization certificate? And you did tell me before, yes, yes it is. So I was wondering if you could talk more about that. You did mention a little bit about the materials that you use and the meaning that they have.
Yeah.
But, something like a naturalization certificate, like the actual one,
Yeah.
it feels very weighty because that's not something that, you easily come across.
Right. Yeah.
Even with your own family members.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, it's funny you say that because I feel like, and no disrespect to like my family, but they're very blasé about it. Where it's kind of just like there, just out and about. I'm just like, you do realize like what this is, right? Which I find kind of interesting, and I think that was part of the reason why I wanted that to be there, because it kind of speaks to how, like, yeah, it is like real documentation, and at the same time, it's like it almost feels like a not a disrespect, but just kind of like a blasé, just like, oh yeah, that's like just another part, just like a piece of documentation that we just have, and I guess in a way, it's like me kind of just being like, hey, this is like really important as far as like both like in my family as well as like just history in general. So I feel like this is something that should be kind of sort of, I guess, held on to for me to like kind of hold on to because clearly nobody else wanted to. And also kind of, I guess in a sense, respecting like the sort of condition that it's in, just kind of just having it there. As well as like the garments is like of my grandmother, so it's like kind of like this, almost like a shrine.
Well, it does and it doesn't
Yeah.
simultaneously because it's in the center of the frame, but
Yeah.
it's just stuck to the wall. I don't even know how you stuck it to the wall. It's not framed,
Yeah.
but then it is framed, So it's just the dichotomy that you play with in your work. I think is interesting, and then the fabric appears to be falling off the frame,
Yeah.
but it's still on there, so, yeah. There were a couple other questions that I wanted.
The one thing I was wondering is, so all the 2D like paintings have very clear, identifiable figures, like portraiture, whereas maybe not necessarily the sculptures here, but I've seen your other sculptures, and some of them have a more universal feel.
Yeah.
Like when I look at them, it's not just, oh, this is your mom, this is so-and-so. Like some of them feel a little more universal in that way. So like with the progress of like the technique, the change in technique, is there also like a slight mutation in like this is only my family members? Is it more like it's kind of branching out a little bit?
Yeah, I think the recent work is definitely more of like a branching out. I still kind of like either use like self-referential, like with like whether it's a self-portrait with the recent works, or it's like sometimes I'll kind of like specifically depict someone in particular. But for the most part, a lot of the recent sculptures kind of in a weird way don't have an identity, and that's kind of something that wasn't really sort of planned or forethought in ahead of time. It was kind of just something that naturally happened. So I think a lot of it is kind of like dealing with this sort of idea of just like sort of these pieces not having an identity, and just like some other works very distinctly having one. So I'm not exactly sure like where I'm going with that specifically, but it is something that myself and like other people have noticed, where it's like they have more of a universal feel, which I think kind of I think in a lot of ways it's like kind of just me sort of wanting to explore, I guess, like other aspects of one, the material, and also two, like I guess like does a portrait have to be referencing somebody to be significant or to be kind of important, I guess. So that's kind of more or less like where the most recent works is like kind of where I'm going as far as that. Yeah. And then I think you had a question in the back.
I was wondering like how premeditated your like choice of medium is, I guess, because there's obviously a lot of variation. So whether it's like relating to the person, relating to like what they make you feel, or if it's just what you think would be best for the artwork itself.
All of the above. I think a lot of it is, some of it is sort of premeditative, where it's like, if I have like a specific sort of aesthetic in mind or like a theme in mind, like I'll go with like either canvas or fabric or metal. But for the most part, it's pretty intuitive. And a lot of the material I use is like either discarded material or old material or like, scrap metal. So I think a lot of it is just sort of unconscious choices as I'm creating. So yeah. So I think sometimes it's premeditative. Most of the time it's not. Yeah. And then was there any other questions? Yeah.
How does research play a part in your process? Like you mentioned taking like reference from family photo books.
Yeah.
And when you find a photo that you want to use as reference, do you often try to like do more research about who the person is, like asking your family members, or do you usually just rely on like the information that you innately have?
Sometimes I rely on the information I have, and then other times I will kind of poke and prod and kind of like get an answer out. But I think a lot of the struggle with that kind of comes from the fact that like a lot of the time, because like my family is so splintered now, where it's like a lot of times communication is really difficult, and people misremember things, or people don't like, there isn't like accurate sort of information when it comes to like a specific person, or kind of even going back to like further down like the family tree. So it's like I think a lot of it is definitely kind of finding my own answers within the process. Yeah. Go ahead.
Could you talk a bit about that piece that's made out of the metal? Because it's interesting how it's sculptural, but it's like two-dimensional.
Yeah. So that piece was kind of one of the, I guess, like first sort of me experimenting with metal or like a welded sculpture, and kind of just, it was basically just me kind of taking different, again, like different scrap material, kind of like blending it all together and trying to figure out like what I can get out of it. And then as I tend to do, I'm just like, oh, I see a face there. So then I kind of just go back and, kind of, I guess, like assert an identity to this piece, which kind of goes back to like the other question of like, when it comes to like whether works are like self-referential or like they have an identity or whatnot. So, but yeah, that was like kind of like one of my first like instances of like playing around with the material.
Can you talk about the residency that you're doing now? How has that influenced your work? Are there any pieces here that you made during your residency?
So far, the only piece from the residency that I made is this one right here. And so the Steel Yard, where I'm currently doing an artist residency, it's been really good so far. I think it definitely helped. It's definitely helping me kind of learn more about sculpture and like kind of the ways of kind of working with the material and trying to gain more of a, I guess, fluidity with the work, where it's like, as you can probably see in some of these pieces, like a lot of it's like sort of sharp, jagged and kind of rough. And now it feels like now I'm kind of like fine tuning a little bit, where it's like I'm trying to really soften those features and kind of get more of a, I guess, naturalistic or, I guess, like, quote, human look to it. Unfortunately, like I said, this is the only recent piece that I have here. And also it's like transportation is like always a big thing. So, but yeah, so far the residency's been pretty good. I think as always with the work, like it's been transformative. It's just, definitely learning a lot, building new connections and kind of like seeing how far I can take it as far as the work is concerned. And it's had its own fair share of joys as well as struggles. Yeah. Yeah. And then did anybody else have questions? Yeah.
Is the work in a sense autobiographical, like telling your story?
Yeah, I think so. I think in a lot of ways it's like, it's me, telling my story in a weird way, where, I mean, even like in the sort of thesis of the show, it's me kind of taking certain objects that previously had a story and I'm kind of asserting my own story into it, which I mean is kind of, I guess you can interpret that as like either good or bad, but I think a lot of it just kind of deals with like my sort of why I have a certain affinity or attraction to certain pieces or objects or people, and then kind of it kind of reflects like just who I am just as a person, I think. Yeah, which I think, you can make the argument about like all art from artists, where it is like this sort of, it is very much this documentation of the artist's life and just like how they kind of view the world and how they kind of act and react. Yeah.
Are there any family members that have seen any of these works?
Oh, yeah.
What was their reaction?
I think the reaction's been positive. I think a lot of it is just like, oh, hey, that's so-and-so kind of thing. So I think a lot of it's been mostly positive, which I'm always like, I guess like in a weird way, I'm always afraid of sort of like my family seeing the work, because I'm always just like, oh, what if they think it's bad, or what if I got like their nose wrong or something? But it's always, but they're always like just, super thrilled to see, I guess like see themselves like through the work, which I think is really compelling, and I think is really sweet that they have that reaction. And also just like the fact that in a lot of ways they kind of view it as me honoring them and the family. So I definitely take pride in that. Yeah. Even if it does come out in like weird ways.
I'm interested in the woman that's over here. You mentioned a little bit about it, and your use of materials and your choice of materials.
Yeah.
But I just keep thinking there may be some metaphor in the materials that are her hair.
Yeah, I think it kind of like a lot of that kind of came about just like that sort of like coarse hair or like rough hair, like if you have like natural black or African hair. So like that's kind of like where I was going with that, and kind of just like being very, I guess, snarky about it. It's just like, I guess because like I got I guess a lot of it kind of came from like a reaction that I had way back when that kind of like stuck with me. So I wanted to kind of, I guess, like show that. And also just like, again, kind of going back to like Rauschenberg and some of his Combine paintings, just kind of seeing what I can kind of attach to the canvas and just kind of playing around with that sort of materiality and things of that nature.
Well, can you maybe, for our students that are here, can you talk about, because you didn't graduate that long ago from undergrad, so, I mean, do you have any advice or, you know, what are some things that you think would be helpful to share with some of our students that are here, and your journey after graduating from college to where you are now?
I think the best advice I can give is just to, one, just to keep creating, just like, even if it means like you have to pivot and kind of do something else, or even if it's just as simple as like drawing, like I think just like the act of creating or just making something is crucial. I think as long as like you're still engaging with it and still in that headspace, I think it'll be fine. And I think just like, and I'm learning now, just like as currently in my journey, just a lot of being an artist is really just kind of learning how to compromise and just learning how to kind of be able to compromise, whether it's like balancing like a 9-to-5 and still having time to create, or just figuring out like what to create, or just like, you know, finding time to either go to openings or, you know, filling out applications and stuff like that. So I think a lot of being an artist is just learning to compromise and just being patient with yourself, and just knowing that if you truly care, there's always a place for you, and the work matters. But yeah, I think that's if I have to give any advice, it would be that. Yeah. Yeah.
Have you done any jobs outside of art, or since you graduated from?
I've had some jobs outside of art where it's like, you know, typical, just like working in food service and things like that. Now I think now within the last like couple of years, I've been fortunate enough to like have or work in like arts related jobs and whatnot. Yeah.
I don't know if I can ask you this, but you did some wonderful work at the Windsor Art Center, and not in your creation of your pieces, but what you brought to that organization. And it sort of connects with what he just asked, is how do those things enter your creative process?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think I'm always thinking about that. Like, I'm thinking about like, you know, like the Windsor Art Center and like that sort of responsibility of like curation and things of that, just because like it is like its own separate thing. And I gained a lot of valuable lessons and information from that. So I'm always super grateful about that. Even like residencies like Steelyard and Farmington Valley, just like that sort of, not so much just having a studio to work out of, but also just connecting with other like studio mates and artists and just other, you know, like donors and stuff like that, and just like other people that you may not know have an influence or have like importance to like the trajectory of the work, but it does, and it means a lot. Yeah, and I think that kind of connects to the sort of job perspective of it, where it very much, and you know, a lot of people don't like to say it, but it's like part of it very much is like the people that you meet and the connections that you make, because you never know further down the line if an opportunity pops up that you were referred to. So I think making those connections and relationships are equally as important and very much part of the process. Yeah.
Are there any final questions for Traé? Any burning questions? Maybe you could end by just talking about one more piece that you haven't talked about yet.
That's piece.
Just close your eyes and speak.
Yeah, just like, I guess I can briefly talk about that piece over there, the one that's sort of in the, like sort of in that corner, just because like it is like the most, it's fairly recent, and it's kind of, I guess with that piece, it's mainly just me kind of re-engaging with sort of the process of painting, just because like it was something that I haven't done in a while, because I've been mainly focused on sculpture and just like sort of 3D work. So, and this piece is like really just me kind of still kind of like working with the theme of like interpersonal relationships and sort of family memories and things of that nature. And also just like, I guess, in a way, just me learning that the process is non-linear. Like, I don't feel like I have to continuously do like one medium. I can always go back and kind of either, you know, do work that's either personal or do work that's like, you know, just for the sake of it. And also just doing work that's purely for me, and like it doesn't need to be shown. Although in this piece in particular, I was like, I feel like I can show that since it relates to the exhibition. But yeah, so I think a lot of the sort of thought process behind that particular piece is just me learning that, process is nonlinear. Like, it doesn't have to be this sort of one sort of straight line. It can branch out into many different avenues, and it can also very well just loop back, and it's fine.
I will also add that when we were hanging the show, Traé wanted that piece, particularly on that curved wall. And it's funny because normally when we're hanging the show, we like run away from the curved walls because they pose so many problems with hanging 2D pieces. But can you just end by talking a little bit about that decision?
Sure.
Like why did you feel that impulse for that curved wall, for that piece?
I feel like, given the size of it, it just made sense. And also, I don't know, there's something like really playful about like that curve that I wanted to, I don't know, I feel like it would have been a cop-out if I didn't put something there, or if I didn't engage with it in some way. And also just, I enjoy like sort of non-traditional ways of displaying work or like installations. So it just felt, to me, it just felt like a no-brainer to just be like, oh, that curve? Yeah, that's fine, I can do that.
Well, thank you so much, Traé.
Yeah.